Millions of people around the world who've read the popular comic strip For Better or For Worse are familiar with the character John, a dentist who's also a model railroading fanatic. Artist Lynn Johnston created the character John based in part on her husband, Rod, a dentist who was also a model railroading fanatic. Well, meet Rod Johnston, a very real and very three-dimensional character.
Well, first of all, when you show up, people expect you to be two-dimensional, and they expect when you turn sideways you disappear. That's the first thing. The second thing is, because the comic strip is so well read and because John is such a lovable character, that my impression is made before I speak. And so I have this great impression, and all I have to do is open my mouth and ruin it. So it's kind of neat to have that, where people smile the minute they see you and say, "Oh, I know you." You know, in fact, John is quite different than I am, but it's still fun to be a comic strip character.
Rod Johnston models large-scale trains, which are model trains large enough to be ridden by an adult. He models 1-inch model railroads, or trains that are 1/12 the size of the real thing. It's about 10 inches wide and stands 13 or 14 inches tall.
When I grew up in Lynn Lake, which was a little mining town of 1,200 people, there was no one around. We were out in the middle of the swamp, 800 miles north of Winnipeg, and the only way to Lynn Lake was by train. And so what we would do is every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday night, the whole town would come down and watch the train come in. And at the end of it was a mining town, at the end of the long train with boxcars and gondolas, which were empty, they were hauling the ore out with that. At the end were two old heavyweight passenger cars and an orange caboose. And we'd watch to see who got off the train, to see what new people were coming to town. And so the next day at school, we'd all talk about who got off the train. And I remember standing on that platform and the whoosh of the air and the sound of the whistle, just as you couldn't see the train as it came around the corner and then marched up and came across the platform. It was always exciting to see that. And so now on my layout, I can lay my head down and watch when the train goes by in 1-inch scale, and it just sends shivers down my spine still.
Rod fell in love with 1-inch the first time he saw it more than 15 years ago. His old Garden Railroad didn't stand a chance. It went up for sale. He now has over a quarter-mile track laid in his North Bay, Ontario backyard. The track winds its way through the 4-acre forest.
The layout started just loosely to be a track through the woods, just like it was in Lynn Lake. And my goal was to build the layout with the train. So I had gondolas, metal gondolas that I purchased from Iron Pony in those days, and 2 GP9s. And I have a little area here where I dump the gravel, and I'd go with my little train down, load up the cars with gravel, and then push it to the end, shovel out the gravel. And once I had 10 feet of roadbed, I'd lay another 10 feet of track down. And so my goal was not to cut any trees down, so the track tends to wind around all the trees. And it goes a quarter of a mile with a loop at the far end. I intended to go further, but I ended up accidentally buying a collection which had some steam engines in it. And you can't run these steam engines backwards. They're very awkward things. So I put a loop in at the far end, and that's where the track is ended at the moment.
In the year 2000, when he found out the Iron Pony Company, the place where he bought his equipment, was going out of business, Rod decided to buy the company. What had been a time-consuming avocation would grow into a second job. He renamed the company Riding Rail Kits, and they now supply others who have the same kind of passion that Rod has. Everything needed to build your own backyard layout.
Nowadays, I would say my average customer is 45 to 50 years old, has a couple of young kids. And really what we've been advertising for and gearing to is for people to put these trains in their backyards. And because it's 1-inch scale, it's the same size as dollhouse size, so you can get all kinds of accessories for this scale. And it's quite wonderful for people to set up whole scenes in their backyards and have their kids out riding on the trains.
Though it's a large toy, you really don't need a giant estate to have a home track. A typical suburban lot will do. And a starter set will probably set you back a few $1,000s. But the feeling you get will be priceless. Model railroads that you can ride and that bring the hobby a little closer to real life. You feel the track, you feel the locomotive, you feel the excitement. But more importantly, you feel the satisfaction this big toy can bring every single time you see someone on board smile.